All right, everybody. Welcome into this special podcast with Alex Patt and Thomas Gibbons. We are discussing a pretty shocking matter this morning, and it is regarding Fred Hoiberg and the Chicago Bulls. Fred Hoiberg, the head coach, was relieved of his duties this morning in timing that was kind of odd. It's not really surprising that Fred Hoiberg is fired, though it may be to some because there was a loyalty factor there for good reasons or not. But I think that just the timing of it all really kind of caught us off guard. Usually when you see firings, you see them in the off season or near the end of the season, but you're pretty much in the middle of the season. And Boylen's your new head coach, and Fred Hoiberg is out. There's a lot to talk about. I think there's a lot of people kind of wondering, okay, is this really going to make the Bulls any better? Is this going to help develop this rebuild that they have? It's a really weird spot that this franchise is in because so far you haven't had your guys healthy. Markkanen's been hurt, Dunn's been hurt, Portis has been hurt, Valentine's not going to play again this year. So there's a lot of things to kind of look for now under a new coaching scheme as guys get healthy. Thomas, what was your initial reaction? I want to know what your initial reaction was.
Well, Alex, thanks for hopping on the podcast today.
Yeah.
It was kind of last minute, Alex. I thought about it, why not? It's sometimes better to get podcasts out. You can, talk more than you would in an article. So I'm glad that Alex and I were able to do this, hop on a quick podcast here as the news broke this morning. My initial reaction was I was actually finishing up a paper for my class. And all of a sudden, I got a buzz on Twitter. I had Twitter open as always. And, I wasn't, my first reaction was, I really didn't know what to say at the first reaction. But it's not like I was necessarily upset. It's not like, we had Steve Kerr and we let Steve Kerr go after a slow start.
Yeah.
We have Fred Hoiberg, who didn't really have much of a resume here. But, no matter what, even, seeing a guy like Hoiberg go, he's been here for a while. We've gotten used to him. And then all of a sudden, December 3rd, with half the roster still on the bench, you drop the axe on him, ship him out of town. So I thought the timing was really weird. Again, it was not like the usual Bulls timing when they like to fire guys on Christmas. So I was actually
short of that.
Yeah, everyone was like, what's up with the non-holiday firing? It was kind of weird like that. There's the comical aspect to it. But, my initial reaction was I couldn't believe it happened now. And I knew it was going to be a shaky start after Markkanen was hurt and Dunn and Bobby went down with the exact same injury of an MCL sprain. And to be honest, I knew the Bulls were not going to have a good start because of that. So I really was not interested in wins and losses as I should be if the team was healthy. So, I kind of put the team's success on hold until everyone got back. Again, we were waiting for Valentine too, but Valentine had season-ending surgery. But just like the reports that came out of the Advocate Center today, that, Fred Hoiberg came in today getting ready for 11 o'clock practice. And he was caught off guard. And, the rumor was that he was expecting to at least have a shot with a healthy roster. And I think that's what he earned. If you go back and look at his previous rosters, it's not the rosters that were set up for him to run his offense, for him to do what he wanted to do. Derrick Rose and Noah and Jimmy Butler with Wade and Rondo, it just wasn't set up for what he wanted to do.
The Wade Rondo thing was just, it was so stupid, and you knew it wasn't going to work.
No, it wasn't going to work, and I'm sure we'll get back into that later when we reminisce of the Hoiberg era.
Yeah.
But when you just look at, what rosters he's been given, he comes from Iowa State where he had one of the best offenses in the country because he was dealing with 21, 22-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And, players in college don't age because they end up graduating. But in the NBA, if you start out with a young roster, you get young athletic guys. That's another great Garpax soundbite. But now the Bulls actually have young and athletic guys. Like most of their roster is under 23, 24 outside Robin Lopez, Holiday, guys like that.
And Robin Lopez doesn't even play anymore. He's just kind of there.
Yeah, there was still really no explanation of why Robin Lopez got bumped out of the rotation. I liked Lopez, especially with Markkanen last year.
So did I.
I wanted to see more of him with Wendell Carter, but that didn't go through. Anyway, I thought this year, especially after the Bulls hit the reset button last year, when they traded Butler, that year was not going to be really counted on Hoiberg's coaching because they were going to lose. They had the roster to lose and get a top pick. And I thought this year, I'm not going to be handing out contract extensions, but I'm going to give Fred Hoiberg a chance to run the offense with his team, with his guys, and the guys that he worked all summer with. And now, that's completely thrown out the window. I didn't really – it's not that I hated Hoiberg. It's not that I loved him. But, I wrote an article last January or, January of 18 of how he seemed to have won over the locker room. The guys respected him. And, I actually talked in there about a possible contract extension if he's really connecting with the young guys. But now he has no shot with the young guys. He's back on the street, and word is he wants to stay in the NBA. So, we'll see where that goes. But
yeah, I have my doubts about that.
He doesn't want to go back to college, of course, because once you get to the top, you don't want to go back to the bottom. So I can see where he's going with that. But again, my initial reaction was, this was just poor timing. It came out of nowhere. Like if at the end of the year, if the Bulls were in a bad spot, nobody developed. Last game of the year, sure. You bring Hoiberg in and say, that's it, you're done. I would not have been surprised there. But December 3rd on a non-victory Monday for the Bears just made it even weirder and worse.
Yeah, this was not really a great weekend for Chicago sports. Let's just kind of throw that out there.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. Fred Hoiberg, the situation is so complicated. Personally, I think as great of a guy as he is, he's a great college coach. I just think he was over his head in the NBA. I just didn't think he had what it takes to be an NBA head coach. And it's not saying that, it's, because he doesn't know how to teach guys how to play good fundamental basketball. It's the fact that he just doesn't have the personality to control some of these NBA egos. When you can't control your team, which, we've seen flashes of him trying to win guys over, like you said, but there were times when he had nothing over the locker room. Especially during like the Wade and Rondo debacle, but that whole thing was a mess. But it just, you need someone that can completely control a locker room. And Fred Hoiberg he didn't have it. And I hate to rail on the guy, but look, he was screwed over by the organization on many accounts. Garpax didn't give him the team that he was used to coaching. They literally just said, here's our friend. Let's hire him. Let's still do what we want, even though it doesn't make any sense. Here you go. But I run this system. Oh, don't worry. That's okay. We're going to have Dwayne Wade shooting more threes in his current form. That's just getting screwed over by the organization. But at the same time, I can't really say Fred was a great NBA coach. It's hard to say because he never really had a chance, but I just, towards the end, you can tell, he was a statue out there, an emotionless statue, and frankly, I think he had enough. So
yeah, he was a statue. Hold on real quick. I'm going to let our viewers know on social media that the chat is open. We've already got some guys talking here. One guy said, in retrospect, do you think the beginning of the end for Hoiberg was that Celtics playoff series turning the way it did? I'm going to address that real quick. I don't know. It's really tough to say. That was the year of the three alphas, and no one saw it coming when Jimmy and Wade turned on the whole locker room, and then you had guys back in Rondo. And then after that, you had kind of like the divide. You had Wade and Butler versus everybody else, because everybody loved Rondo and everyone was going to back up. Everyone was going to side with Rondo after. You remember when Rondo came out with that Instagram post talking about his vets and my vets would never turn on me. My vets always had my back. So that just added to the Bulls' drama. But
I'm rolling my eyes as you bring that back.
But I don't know if that was, the beginning of the end. You
I don't
know,
think so.
if you look back, Alex, do you think the Bulls could have won it if Rondo didn't get hurt? Because when you saw the Bulls rolling with Rondo, when the way they were rolling, I mean, it didn't seem like anybody could stop them. And then, as much as maybe we did not like Rondo in Chicago, we kind of had a soft spot for him come that playoff series because we're like, holy crap, we could beat the Boston Celtics. And then Rondo gets hurt, and then it all falls downhill. The offense, stalls and everything like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's funny. Watching those first two games of that playoff series was probably the most fun I had watching a Bulls game, probably since like the pre-injury Derrick Rose days, or at least when Rose came back and they beat the Bucks in the first round, they shredded them crazily in Game 6. But I mean, that was a lot of fun to watch, and frankly, I wasn't planning to be that into that series because I'm like, okay, we're an 8th seed, we're stuck in hell anyways with two aging guys. But then you watch those games and it was fun, and then Rendo got hurt. Would they have won that series? Maybe they would have had a chance, but I think the Celtics either way would have counter adjusted, and they were just clearly the better team. To address the initial question that was asked to you about was that the beginning of the end of the Hoiberg era, I'm going to say no, because personally, I think the Bulls really just wanted to get 1 year of playoff and revenue, and they were going to tear it down afterwards. I am convinced that that was the plan all along, is that they wanted to do a very short-term thing where they could get to the playoffs, where they could sell some playoff tickets, sell some Rondo and Wade jerseys, and then tear it all down.
Yeah, and it's funny about the Wade jerseys. Wade actually wore his Bulls jersey when he came to play the Bulls when he met Khalil Mack after the game. Wade was wearing his Bulls jersey coming in, pregame. For whatever that's worth, however you want to look at it. But I mean, I kind of thought, I don't know, maybe it's like maybe have a cool aspect to it. Like he's wearing the jersey he played in just a few really kind of like short months years ago. But that was kind of the talk of Twitter for a little bit.
Yeah, it was. And I saw that clip with Khalil Mack, and it was kind of cool. And look, I really think Dwayne Wade is one of the best basketball players of my generation. I'm sure you would agree too. In terms of just shooting, he's one of the best.
Sure.
And I'll always have a soft spot for Dwayne Wade, the player, but they brought him into such garbage circumstances. It kind of epitomized the whole Garpax era, where it's like, yay, we're kind of giving you what you want, but not really. We're not the worst, but we're not great. Because let's face it, when we wanted Dwayne Wade, when we would have been partying in the streets, as if they would have signed him in 2010, when the team was young and legitimately ready to make a run. But
and then that's the thing. It all got ruined. The Bulls' dream of getting Wade got ruined because Wade, James, and Bosh decided to get together, and that's when they had all their success. But John Paxson always wanted Dwayne. Of course, he wanted him. He wanted him in the draft. He missed out on him on free agency. So then all of a sudden he comes around, and Pax finally got his guy. And
and that's how they'd say it. Look, we got our guy.
Yeah, okay. And I still you look back and everyone was it was the talk of the town how Wade got so much money. And then, he had, he got bought out because, you weren't going to keep him around. You were going to.
There's no point.
Yeah, you were going to hit the reset button. But, I mean, that's how, I guess, gullible the front office is, that Wade got that amount of money for that second-year option. That was something else. I mean, hats off to his agent.
Yeah, really. Dwayne Wade was laughing all the way to the bank. And not only did you get Dwayne Wade years too late for just the organization, you got him too late in his career. He can't even play a full season now. There were literally games where he had to take off. And you're just thinking to yourself, this team is so mediocre and he's taking games off. Why the hell is he even on this team?
Yeah, his nickname's the Flash, right? That's what the people were calling him.
Mm-hmm.
But, he, again, now I kind of, a little bit of, I'm trying to say, a little bit of comical, it's comical now because he is a Flash in flashes, because he doesn't play every day, but, he's still got that skill, and he's back for one more year. He's getting his farewell tour. So, we'll see what happens with the Heat. I mean, the Heat are obviously better than the Bulls, so Wade always finds a better team than Chicago.
Well,
So,
yeah. Yeah. This also sums up the Chicago Bulls free agency. They can't land the big superstar in their prime, so they have to settle for what's below that. That's either a solid player, but not one that's going to make a huge difference, i.e., Carlos Boozer, or somebody who's older, i.e., Dwayne Wade, Rajon Rondo, or Pau Gasol. And
mhm.
look, those three guys were still they weren't bad for the Bulls. Pau Gasol had a nice little run for the Bulls. Rondo had that, playoff series, but they weren't what you needed for a title run.
Yeah, I mean, I was a huge fan of Powell. As Stacey King would be like, pow, pow, pow. I loved Powell during his time, and I think that he was brought in, not out of his prime, but he was still, a solid player for the
He
Bulls.
was. He was.
Yeah, so I enjoyed the Powell era for sure.
He's probably my favorite free agent signing that we've had in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, as in terms of I guess overall production, but if there is one thing I think guard packs can always hang their hat on finding that backup point guard. You had the
Uh,
Aaron Brooks, DJ
yeah.
Augustine, Nate Robinson. So that was always kind of like a little extra when it came to breaking down the Bulls roster was they always had a solid backup point guard to back up Derek. And when Derek had to go down, when Derek did go down through as many injuries in Chicago, those guys got more playing time than they usually did. So maybe a little bit of the fire went away. But I mean, we had a good run of those backup point guards. Campaign ruined it all for us. But
Remember John Lucas III, Mike James? Those guys didn't play a lot, but when they played, they were pretty solid.
yeah, what's the other guy's name? Etwan
TJ
Moore. Etwan Moore.
Etwan Moore.
He
Yeah.
kept the TNT Bull streak going with that game
Yeah.
winner versus OKC.
He did, yes.
So I mean, when guys like that who can't afford, don't have the necessary skill to be a guy who can play 35, 40 minutes a night, but they can give you a solid 15, 20 when your starter needs a break. I mean, all those guys in previous years did what they had to do for the team and did just enough.
And now we have Cameron Payne at point guard.
Now we have Cameron Payne. We'll get into the roster in a little bit. But let's circle back to Fred Hoiberg. Again, to recap, we were both shocked, but not that upset.
Yeah.
So recently, of course, former Bulls beat writer Nick Friedel, who we all got to know and love, I'm sure. He's now covering the Warriors full time. I'm sure
Which sucks.
Yeah, I'm sure
loved
he's elated. But I got sick of Nick Friedel. He was always against the front office, and he was always hating on whenever he chance he could to talk bad about the front office because they let Tom Thibodeau go. And I remember when I went to the first game where Tibbs was with the Timberwolves, and he came back to the building. Nick was the first guy to say Tibbs needs a rightful video. Blah blah blah. He gave them so much, but former players deserve a video like Derek and Noah, MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. In the big picture, Tibbs got you where. He didn't get you a title. He gave you some nice seasons, but you going to make a video for a coach? I mean, it would just be Tibbs blowing his head off every chance he could.
Something really funny, speaking of Tibbs blowing head off, I was at a game in 2012, and the Bulls were playing a day game against the Nets, and, this is when the Bulls were contending, and they were really good, and the Nets were still really terrible, so they were heavily favored, but the Bulls played an awful game. They're down by 30. I'm sitting in the nosebleeds in the 300 level. The whole building is dead quiet, but all you could hear was Thibodeau yelling all the way down from the court, from all the way up at the 300 level. That's all you could hear.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think there was one game, I think it was the first game he came back as a Timberwolf. John Greenberg from The Athletic, he sat behind the press table and literally recorded Hoiberg all night. I mean, Thibodeau, it was pretty funny.
I was just saying, if you recorded Hoiberg, you would just hear nothing.
Yeah, I should not have said that. Yeah, Hoiberg would just be mice.
Yep. Squeak, squeak.
So reason I brought up Nick Friedel is because now he covers the Warriors. And, of course, every coach, if they want to, we're going to talk about it. We all know Steve Kerr is very open to talking to the media, whether it's about basketball, whether it's about life. He even gets into politics. And then his name is trending on Twitter for maybe the wrong reasons. But he had this to say today about Fred Hoiberg. I don't really look at it as anything difficult. I look at it as a privilege to coach great talent. I look at Fred Hoiberg today, who was released by the Bulls. Fred never had a chance without really any talent to work with, to build something. I was blessed with talent from day one, an incredible amount of talent. So I'm privileged, I'm lucky, and I enjoy every day of the process. So I don't really look at this as anything taxing. And the big piece from there is that he said that Fred didn't have a lot to work with, and that's true. This season was the year that he was supposed to have a lot to work with. I mean, when you got everybody healthy, you were going to have a young nucleus of Zach LaVine, Lowry Markkanen, Wendell Carter Jr., Chris Dunn, Bobby Portis, Hutchinson, Blakeney, Shaquille Harrison, who's played some nice minutes, Archie Diacono, who it could look to be a serviceable backup point guard. So Hoiberg was finally going to have maybe that team to do something. This team, could they have squeezed? I mean, I don't know if it's out of the picture yet with how kind of crappy the bottom of the East is. But I mean, if the young guys get going, and if they get the ball rolling, could they squeak in to the playoffs? Sure. But I always thought Fred Hoiberg gave him the best chance. Like, why? It still just irritates me that he was canned before he got the full roster. But then everyone's like, oh, then what about the full roster? Pax, what? Why wasn't Fred given his opportunity? Well, then Pax said that it wasn't about wins and losses. It was about the spirit and the energy in the building, and it just wasn't there.
I also wonder, I think that as much as we've been told, which is still pretty vague, I think it's pretty obvious to me that there was more to this than just what he vaguely described as lack of energy, lack of focus, or whatever he said. There had to be something more to this that the media and the fans just don't know, or else I'm not sure there would have been a firing at this point of the season. If you were trying to wait him out to see how things were going to go, then you know what kind of guy you have in Fred Hoiberg. He was never a high energy guy. I don't know if he just lost too much of it or if he just was like, I'm kind of done with this. But I think one game that really stands out to me this year was, you probably know which one I'm thinking about, against Golden State.
Mm-hmm.
That one stood out because you had even people like Stacey King, the biggest Bulls homer in the entire universe, basically calling them out for their efforts.
Yeah.
That was telling. And that to me right there was kind of, I don't know if it was really an indicator, but that kind of made me think, how much longer does this guy have? And is he really the guy for the future? And I never really thought that was the case, but I can't help but wonder, if you want to look at a point that could have been the beginning of the end of the Hoiberg era, I think it was that game.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think, as stuff I was talking about today with friends and family is that there are a lot of blowout losses this year. And that, that could have been the last straw too. But again, my uncle was at that Golden State game. And, at a point, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean, Bulls fans started cheering for Klay Thompson.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
Like, at what point do you say, forget this team? Let's witness history. And, it was just, you're just in awe. Like my uncle said, he was, you're just in awe watching Klay Thompson just go three after three after three. Going into that game, Alex, he had one of the worst 3-point percentages in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And this was 2 weeks through the season. So again, he was, just getting started. But I mean, he went off, and like his record 3, it set the record. I mean, guys just literally walk to him. I mean, I'm sure if you're down that much and you're just getting pummeled, you're going to lose interest. But just the overall effort level all year, I just don't see it. You got 5 wins. They're all close wins, so it's not like you're blowing out anybody. But I mean, you just go down the roster. I mean, you go down the schedule. Let's see. At Charlotte, October 26th, loss 135-106. Golden State was 149-124. I can't believe they put up 124. Denver on Halloween, they lost by 1 in overtime. That was a tough one to swallow. I mean, the most excited we've seen of the Bulls, or the most exciting game, was that New York game, November 5th. They won in double OT. They lost at Milwaukee November 16th, 123-104.
That was another one I wanted to bring up, because you remember in the first half, they were up by like 20. Didn't they say it was a record for like biggest lead blowout after having like some big lead or something?
They were shooting lights out. Here, let's pull up the box. Let's pull up the box score, because they were shooting lights out. And then I think the third quarter, like, I think they only made like 2 or 3 shots. Like, it was a bad performance. I didn't catch that game. I don't know what I had going on, but I remember I missed that game.
I only saw the first half when the Bulls were doing good, and then I left. And then I looked at the box score, and I saw that they were like losing by 5. I'm like, okay, that's no surprise. And then I looked at the final score, and I saw the margin of victory for the Bucks. I'm like, we were up by like 20 at one point.
Yep, here it is. The Milwaukee Bucks erased a 22-point deficit. The Bulls only scored 17 in the third to the Bucks 46.
Yeah. And that lead evaporated in the blink of an eye. Yeah. And as soon as they lost the lead, the Bulls basically, it almost looked like they just threw up their hands and said, oh, well, we tried.
Yeah. And I mean, there's another one you could say was the beginning of the end, because, it's not, if Pax is true by saying it's not about wins and losses, then, throw that out the window. You could definitely say it was about spirit and energy, because if you have a 22-point lead, I mean, the Bucks have some pretty good players. I mean, that's telling that, you already have a depleted roster. You're missing, Dunn, Portis, and Markkanen for that game, but yet you had a 22-point lead against a pretty good Milwaukee Bucks team, and you threw it out the window. So was it on the players' effort? Did, Fred Hoiberg not fix anything at halftime? You just wonder, what's going on. And I mean, you bring up a good point too. Was Fred just like, I'm just going to throw my hands up and say, to hell with it. But again, if Hoiberg was so shocked today when, he got the news that he was gone, I mean, if you look back, their last 2 wins are November 21st and November 10th.
Yikes.
They're riding a 7-game losing streak. They were in that game for a little bit versus Houston. Detroit, if I remember, they were in it. They lost by 3 to the Bucks on November 28th. So, I mean, when you really look at the big picture, you kind of say, oh, okay, now I see why Hoiberg got canned. But then when you look at Pax's comments about how it's not about wins and losses, then you're kind of back to the same spot of, why did he get fired? It's kind of like this continuous circle. But I mean, again, we're not at the Advocate Center. We're not in the locker room after the games. You really didn't get that big of a sense from reporters. Was the energy low? Was the energy really that high? It's kind of hard to report that. I mean, you're going to be mad after a loss. You're going to be happy after a win. So, there's something we don't know. There's stuff behind closed doors that obviously Pax wanted to make a change, because I'm not going to put Gar and Pax together, because Gar didn't even speak today, and it doesn't seem like Gar is really in the public eye anymore.
No, he's not.
So, I'm just going to, Pax is the guy who's been talking since the rebuild. Gar was saying some dumb stuff, like young and athletic, and then getting Wade and Rondo, or making that trade for Cameron Payne and saying he's the point guard of the future.
We gave up a draft pick to get Cameron Payne, for God's sake.
Yeah. So, I mean, Gar Forman has said some stupid stuff, and that's put him under fire. I mean, I can't even imagine, like, what after that conference when Gar said that we see Payne as maybe the point guard of the future. Like, I wonder what Pax said to him, because Pax wasn't saying the same thing. Pax is like, okay, I think we got a solid young player here. He hasn't had a lot of minutes in OKC, but when he has, he's taken some advantage of it. We're going to see how this goes. And then you got Gar. All right, Pax, let me take over the mic here. Yeah, he's the future point guard. This is it. We're not going to do we're not going to take anybody else. We're not going to, try out anybody else. He's it. Like, you just can't say that stuff.
No. And everyone in the world is like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you say this guy's our franchise quarterback if you draft him with the second overall pick like you do for Trubisky. But if you're trading for a guy, Cameron Payne, who's already had injury problems, who doesn't see a lot of minutes behind Russell Westbrook, maybe one of the best point guards in the NBA, you don't say he's the point guard of the future when he doesn't have a lot of game tape. So it's like I said, continuous circle of this. Bulls are riding a bad losing streak, but then it's not about wins and losses, so you're back at the beginning.
I just wonder if part of that means quality, because these aren't close tank losses. Because when you look at a tank loss, it's a good effort in a loss. These are just, you're getting your ass kicked.
Yeah, there was a lot of good tank losses last year. Like, just
tons of them.
Tons of them. Yeah, like we wanted that. Like this, that was a great tank loss. Like I was at a couple games where you lose by free throws, or I don't know if I was at like maybe a buzzer beater game or not, but like I left the building with my uncle. Like that was a great tank loss. Like this is what I paid the price of admission for.
My brother Jay and I, as many Bulls fans know, Jason Patt, the two of us and my dad were at a terrible tank win, which was against the Mavericks last year. Do you remember that game?
I probably don't, but tank wins hurt much harder than tank losses, even though that's so funny that, we're talking opposites here. But, as when we found out last year after they got rid of Nico and that losing streak just went, say goodbye to that win streak where they turned things around, you just wanted to accept losing because, the top of the draft was so talented as it is going to be this year. And, as it probably will be for the near future, because there's so many talented kids. And especially if you're one and done, you don't have a lot of, the people aren't going to see a lot of your flaws, and they're just going to go for size and speed and just natural talent.
Yeah, for sure. Here's something interesting I wanted to point out. I'm looking at the wins losses of the Bulls just on basketballreference.com. So you look at the margin of victory and all that fun stuff. The only time they beat a team by more than 10 points was on October 27th against a really bad Atlanta Hawks team. All the other wins have been by less than 10 points, as in all 4 of them.
Yeah. So, there's something to say there that about you maybe gutting out a win, but if you want to make strides as a team, as an organization, you got to be able to blow out some bad teams. Like you only won by 1 point to Cleveland without Kevin Love and J.R. Smith, who basically threw in the towel. J.R. Smith only had 4 shots that game. Larry Nance Jr. was 1 for 8. Thompson killed you. Thompson had 22 and 12. Colin Sexton, who's going to be a nice piece for him, had 20 points. Rodney Hood was 7 for 15. Clarkson killed you off the bench. So, that's a game where the Cavs have 1 win. Like, that should be a blowout. Like, I'd say even without some of the big names that are still injured. Like, you still got to find ways to beat up the bad teams, especially if you're a bad team, but especially if you're a good team.
Oh, for sure. You look at this team's You basically look at this team dynamic and you see, look, their defense is terrible. We all knew it was going to be terrible. When you signed Jabari Parker, you knew you were only going to get offense from him. But, hopefully, I think what Bulls fans are hoping for would at least see strides in the scoring once Lauri Markkanen finds his groove again, once Chris Dunn comes back. because the only way they were going to squeak out wins this year was in shootouts. Now, at this point, the tank is on, bring me the tank, but you would at least like to see some better offensive efforts from the Bulls.
Yeah. A cool news nugget just got published by Casey Johnson. Last summer, Jim Boylen spent some time with Phil Jackson preparing for his first head coach interview. So this should be an interesting article. I'm going to go through it here a little bit, see if I can get any.
I kind of wanted to talk about Boylen because
yeah, I mean he's now the guy. He's like Colleton. He's going to be taking up a lot of mic time, and he's the guy again. Like the Hawks with Colleton, they gave Colleton a multi-year deal, so no matter what, he's going to be here next year, and that's what the Bulls thinking is too. Is Boylen's contract runs through next season. Paxson said that they want him here next season. So does that already mean that he's guaranteed the job next year? Because I would have loved a head coaching search. Like I want that again.
Me too. But this isn't what the Bulls do. They got to hire people they know. That's all they know. They are one of the least creative teams in all of sports.
Because as soon as I saw Hoiberg fired, Boylen bumped up. I'm like, okay, start Googling some names. Let's get some coaching search. Let's get a coaching article up today. But then, Adrian Wojnarowski came in with the Bulls have placed no interim tag on Boylen.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
saw that same tweet.
I'm like, well, here we go. Not that, again, we only know so much about Boylen.
Oh yeah, we got to give him a chance.
Yeah, of course, give him a chance. He was a coach at Utah for a while, didn't have much success there. He was an assistant under Pop. He's won a couple of championships in his assistant. So, I'd say it's about time, you give him a shot at the head coaching realm.
It's not like his pedigree is bad. He's been with a number of NBA teams, the Rockets, the Warriors, the Bucks, the Pacers, the Spurs under Pops, like you said. So he's been around.
He's had some good mentors. And, if you're able to talk to Phil Jackson about interviewing for a head coach, I mean, you got a pretty good way around the league. That's one thing he's got going for him.
Yeah, for sure.
But now he's going to get a chance to run his own team. Again, like we've said earlier, he's a much more vocal guy than Hoiberg is on the sideline. You could see it. You could see it in the huddle. You can see it just play by play. He was, more of their defensive assistant. And, that's the first thing he was talking about when he got a chance to get up behind the mic. He was talking about we're going to get better at defense. We're going to get better at defensive boards. We're going to get better at defensive transition. And then, at the end, he drops, we're going to be consistent on offense. So I think he's going to bring like that Thibodeau mentality, which I loved under Thibodeau. Like the Bulls, like giving up the least amount of points in the game, least amount of points per game in the league. And then you still have some offensive weapons where you really don't got to worry so much about offensive sets, where it was like the opposite for Hoiberg. Like he wanted to run Hoyball, his offensive system. And, it didn't work out considering that the Bulls right now are dead last in offensive efficiency. They're 28th in points per game. So, Hoyball really wasn't working. But then, again, it goes back to he didn't have the right roster. And then this year was supposed to be the time where we could see Hoyball in action.
Yeah, well, that is all not to be. I actually gotta say, who the real MVPs are? The people who changed Jim Boylen's Wikipedia this morning, because when the news broke, I pretty much went to Wikipedia to look up Jim Boylen, and he was already listed as head coach for the Chicago Bulls.
Oh yeah, man, they're on their stuff. Especially I like all the, it does. I don't, it kind of gets old, but it doesn't. If the, whoever beats who in like the NFL or the NBA, and like the opposing coach or player is like, he is owned by the Bears or he is owned by the Patriots. Like, it doesn't get old. It's like when people put like game-winning shots with Titanic music. Like, I love that every time.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's so great.
It makes the moment so much better. Like, especially like after Nova won the championship, or that big pass to Stephon Diggs last year. Like, it just makes
when the Cubs won the World Series, the final out, the Chris Bryant final. It was perfect.
You can't name every, single one, but those are just some that popped in my head where you're like, it made it so much better.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So yeah, back to Boylen. He'll get his chance. One other thing he said today is he's going to have a talk with every player on the roster tonight in Indy. talk about their roles, and obviously we'll see whose role is whose. Come game time tomorrow, he said Lauri Markkanen is starting, so he got off on the right foot with that one. Put Markkanen back in the lineup. Let's go. Let's get going. So there's his first good move. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll be able to count how many good moves he can make up this season. But he's going to have a chance to talk with every player tonight. So, like I said, we'll see whose role is who come game time. Campaign better not be playing. That's all I'm saying, Alex. Alex had to step away for a bit. He'll be back in a minute. But yeah, so we'll see tomorrow what the rotation looks like. It's probably going to be most of the same. Obviously, I mean, Campaign, Felicio, those are going to be the kind of guys that aren't going to be doing that much probably. But Markkanen's back. Dunn and Portis are practicing with the team again. I think they stayed back to practice with Windy City, the G League team, so they'll practice with them tomorrow at the Advocate Center, so that they're good. They could possibly be back probably next week. So we'll see how that goes. Alex will, again, be back in a minute. But yeah, Boylen, he had some time with Utah. He was an assistant around the league. So, we'll see where it goes. And again, the last thing I wanted to talk about with Alex, hopefully he rejoins us here in a minute, was, again, now the Bulls, they let go of Hoiberg, but we still cannot forget about all the cap space the Bulls have this season, off season. Alex is coming back in a minute. The Bulls, this is going to be the summer that they wanted to make a splash in. With Jabari, according to Basketball Reference, with Jabari on the books for next year, the Bulls only have about $73 million on the books. Take off that $20 million for Parker. I mean, you're in a pretty good spot. The Bulls did not spend big in the summer of 2016 when the cap went up. They avoided all those ugly contracts like Timothy Mozgov and, all those guys who, all those teams that decided let's spend all this money because they were just going crazy, and it came back to bite them. Guys like Lou Aldane and Joakim Noah, teams spent all this money and the guys didn't work out, whether it was injury or whether just the guys didn't fit the team. But the Bulls have a chance. Again, you let go of your coach, so, you don't know how much people are going to want to come here. The Bulls have never been a big destination for free agents outside guys like Powell and, guys like that. But, there's some intriguing names this summer. Guys like, Thompson, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Kemba Walker. There's some big names. And, with those contracts from 2016 and contracts from a couple of years before, there's a lot of teams that can't spend a lot of money. And the Bulls are going to be one of those lucky teams that have this enormous amount of cap space. The Bulls got cap. The Brooklyn Nets, the LA Clippers. There's a lot of teams that are lucky enough to have all this cap, and it's going to come down to, of course, money talks. But if the Bulls these young core guys really take off, and they're probably going to get another lottery pick if they really can't turn things around. But if you had a guy like Reddish from Duke or Zion, you would have a young nucleus of Zion, Markkanen, Carter, Dunn. I don't know if Portis is going to be back, but then you got Hutch, Valentine's still under contract for another year, Zach LaVine. So, you would have a nice young core there where, you can sit down with the Kevin Durants and you can sit down with the Kemba Walkers and say, we have the cap space. We have some young guys. What do you say? And I think if the young guys really take off and Zach LaVine becomes an all-star like we think he can, and Lauri Markkanen does the same and more of what he did last year, that then maybe, some free agent says, you know what, I'm gonna pack my bags and I'm gonna come to Chicago. And that would be the best thing for the Bulls, because if they don't really land any big guys, then they're just back in mediocrity. They're back to where they started after they traded Jimmy. They're just back. They don't, it proves in this league that you need superstars to win big ball games. You do. And even if Zach LaVine becomes into a star, Markkanen, emerges as a star, they're still young guys. You want a veteran. You want a guy with some miles on him who's played on winning teams, who's had that playoff experience, to come in with these young guys and gel. I liked what Chris Dunn has done so far with the Bulls. He's had some flashes, but again, he's had a couple injuries that have kept him off the court, and it's hindered his development. It's hindered his time on the court. So if the Bulls were not sold on Dunn, he still has one more year on his deal. So if a guy like Kemba Walker is interested in coming to Chicago, then, if Dunn doesn't impress you, then, you give Kemba the cash, because Kemba Walker, he's a pretty damn good point guard, and I'd love to have him in a Bull uniform for sure. And then if Dunn isn't starting caliber, then he could maybe be one of the best backups. And, who knows if he would be happy with that. He came to Chicago expecting to be the go-to point guard, and he was ready for the role and all that stuff. But, a guy like Kemba, and I'm dreaming every day about Kevin Durant coming to Chicago, because that would just, that puts you over the top. You'd have a nice team there with KD, and if Zach LaVine really takes off, and if Lauri Markkanen takes off, and Carter becomes a nice role player, and Hutchinson off the bench, and you draft another guy in the draft, then you're set. And the Bulls have so much cap space that you can sign Kevin Durant and then maybe a low-level player. Let me see what other free agents are coming up this year. Let's see here. There's definitely there's more names just outside the big guys. KD, Kawhi Leonard, Irving, Butler, Thompson, Kemba Walker. Porzingis is restricted. Boogie Cousins unrestricted. Tobias Harris unrestricted. A couple guys have player options. Nikola Vucevic unrestricted. Julius Randle player option. Eric Bledsoe unrestricted. Terry Rozier restricted, but that's a guy that maybe you could give an offer sheet to, and maybe the Celtics won't match it. I wouldn't mind spending, some low money on Rozier. I think he's a pretty good player. So yeah, there's a couple guys there at the top where, you can go and, at least probably get a meeting with. Kevin Durant's going to reject his player option. Klay Thompson's unrestricted. He's going to see what's out there for him. Kemba Walker, unrestricted. Don't really know if I'd entertain talking to Boogie Cousins, but who knows? But there's options out there, and the Bulls are going to have some nice cap space, and hopefully the young core takes off, so the Bulls can entertain some of the big guys this summer. I was again glad that Alex and I were able to hop on and talk a little bit of Bulls. Again, shocking news today. Not that anyone's really that upset that Hoiberg's gone. Again, not a lot of success, but again, you can pair it to he didn't really have the roster for it. But another coach in the John Paxson era. This marks the fifth coach And, a lot of questions today of, how many more chances are they going to get? We know Reinsdorf is very loyal to his employees. You can look over at the Sox, Hahn, Williams. You can look at the Bulls with Gar and Pax. And you just got to wonder, too, how many more chances are they going to get? Because they've blown it up a couple times here. They've built some teams that could win it all, and they've rebuilt it a couple times, and they've, again, you're not going to say it right away, but they've tanked and they've went for that top pick, and there's not been a lot of success. So you got to wonder how many more chances are they going to get, and if everything still goes down the drain this year, and Boylen's not the guy, and the team's still not responding, they're still losing games, or at the bottom of the league at the end of the year, does Reinsdorf pull the plug? Does he pull the plug on Garpax and say, we got a lot of young players, but, I want somebody else leading the guys out of the tunnel. And that's all very possible. Right now it doesn't seem possible because Garpax have, one of the highest job security, they have jobs, one of the highest job securities in the league. Those guys, it looks like they'll never lose their jobs. But it's a possibility. I know a lot of fans will be relieved if Garpax were canned at the end of the year, and then you're able to find a new VP and a new general manager, and the whole coaching staff would be gone, and you're left with some younger players and a new face in the front office and a new face on the bench. It wouldn't be the worst. You wouldn't be starting the rebuild over. You would have this enormous amount of cap space with a top pick, and hopefully some, you still got a budding star in Markkanen, and hopefully Levine again, comes out to something. But it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, and I don't think many people would be against it if Gar and Pax were finally shown the door. It's a possibility. I doubt it's going to happen, just like many of us doubt that those guys are going to lose their jobs. It looks like they're going to get another chance with another coach. And if Boylen doesn't work out, then they're going to, are they going to get another chance to hire another guy? It looks that way. And the Bulls, again, they still seem to be very, very, very far away from being contenders in the East. And it's upsetting. Just like the Blackhawks, Bulls and Blackhawks fired their coaches. So far for the Blackhawks, Joe Quenneville wasn't the problem. Okay, maybe it kind of was time for a move. Maybe the Blackhawks internally said, you know what, maybe it is time for a coaching move. But Hawks were 500 with Quenneville this year. And they've been really, really bad with Colleton behind the bench. And I'm not putting any blame on Colleton. Just I know it's kind of a Bulls-focused thing, but I'm just going to branch off a little bit here. I'll connect it back. But it's not on Colleton. Colleton was not given the best roster. The Blackhawks roster is not very good. Same thing goes for the Bulls. Outside a couple young pieces, there's not a lot of guys that are going to help you make the playoffs or, be, excuse me, really anything special in the NBA. The Jabari experiment has really not worked out. But again, it's a low risk, high reward. It's a team option, which was very, very, that was a smart move by the Bulls. I'll give them that team option. So they can just cut ties at the end of the year. Holiday and Lopez, who have been highly respected in the locker room, will be gone after this year. Cameron Payne, he'll be gone. Bobby Portis. Bobby is another discussion for another day because you don't want to get stuck paying Bobby a lot of money to be your sixth man. But, it would hurt to lose a talent like him, especially how far he's come. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, so on the books next season for the Bulls, it's, really not a lot. So we'll see how Boylen does, but the salary cap is there this summer. They have to fill it. And, will the young guys be good enough to put something on tape and want a guy like Kemba Walker, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant even think about moving into the Windy City? So a new era starts for the Bulls again. Tomorrow night in Indy, take on the Pacers. Boylen's first game in charge. We'll see how it goes. Again, we're not, there's not going to be this huge difference overnight. It's going to take a while for him to implement what he wants to see, but hopefully there's, some high energy. Again, he's focused on a lot of the defensive end. So, again, it's going to take time for to see really any big differences, but new man in charge. Hoiberg is out, Boylen in, Markkanen's back, Dunn and Portis are close to being back, so that's good. So, again, Hoiberg was let go just days and maybe even a week before the team was fully healthy. Again, this was supposed to be a shot. He was supposed to finally have the roster that he could work with. Gar and Pax finally brought in had a roster in place where it was a lot of young guys who are athletic that can run Hoiberg's offense. And even though Hoiberg's known for his offense, the Bulls' offensive efficiency has been bad the past couple of years, but it's because he wasn't dealt the best chance. And I think that's going to be the narrative of the Hoiberg era, was he wasn't given the talent and he wasn't given the best chance. So that'll wrap it up for this Windy City Chronicle show. I'm hoping to do more of these. I'm almost done with my semester shortly. So hopefully, along with myself and Alex and some other guys I got writing for me over at windycitychronicle.com, we can do a lot more of these. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the guys who put some stuff in the group chat. I really appreciate it. And I'm Thomas Gibbons. You can follow me on Twitter at ThomasGibbons_3. You can follow Alex on Twitter at ShyFanPat. Let me double check. Alex Pat is on Twitter at ShyFanPat1. That is Pat with 2 T's. He writes for me at Windy City Chronicle. He hosts Fan Sides Climbing the Ivy podcast on the Cubs. He writes for Cubby's Crib, Blasting News. He does a podcast for Swirsky Sports. Alex does a lot of stuff. I suggest giving him a follow. He's got a lot of good content, a lot of good sports takes. He's great on other podcasts. He really runs that Climbing the Ivy show very well. So he's definitely a follow on Twitter if you're, a big Chicago sports fan. So head on over there. Again, thanks for tuning in. Hope to be back on the air soon. Go Bulls.